We're moving on to number 6 now, and a very different album entirely. First metallic album on this list, but yet there's a lot in this album for non-metal heads as well. It's not a purist metal album, there's no doubt. This band haven't been a pure metal band since '96, when they started out as a very heavy doom metal band. Now there's even trip hop in what they play, alternate rock, big influence from The Cure, anything depressing basically as well. But a fantastic band, and with this album they got more technical with the drumming, in my opinion. The lead singer's voice got a lot stronger, and it's a fantastic album. Yet fans of the band don't like it because it was a bit more mainstream. But it's not really mainstream because it's not rivaling Rihanna in the charts, is it? I hate when people say that, but there you go. But I will champion this album because it's fantastic. But I've not even said who it's about yet. Where is it? Well, it is the band Catatonia and the album The Great Cold Distance, released in March 2006, running in at 51 minutes long with 11 songs on the album. Yeah, great band, one of my very, very favourites, as you can probably tell. This is my joint favourite album of theirs, along with Discouraged Ones. Yeah, Jonas Rensk, the lead singer, used to do growled, screeched vocals in the early 90s, mid-90s when he started out, but he fucked his voice up basically, and realised that if he kept doing that he'd probably ruin his voice for life and stuff, so had to do clean vocals. And his vocals in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were making like a depressive rock, and his weak vocals suited the music, but they got heavier since then. But they've still got, they're not fully metal, they're not fully doom and all that, but his voice has got stronger. The drumming on this album, as I said, is more technical. They're very dark, ridiculously good atmosphere. A lot of these songs are really chuggy and heavy, like Consternation, or Rusted, or Increase, or The Itch. And there's not like screaming vocals in this, but there's screaming as a background. You just hear a long, elongated sort of scream. And a lot of these songs are short, the majority are like just over 4 minutes. Not that short, but yeah, it's very focused, this album. Yeah, it's very dark band. I love that. Music for all moods, basically. But, you know, Viva Emptiness is a great album as well. It's kind of similar to this. The last one, though, they did, Night is a New Day, had a lot of trip-hop influence, and they could go more. They spoke about bringing growled vocals back into the mix, which would shock a lot of people. Or they could go trip-hop, they could go either way, and that's why I love this band. But if you're in the mood for a bit of metal, a bit of thinking man's metal, which is quite pretentious. I do love all genres of metal, really, but you know what I mean. It's a good album to listen to if you don't like heavier music and you just want a bit of angst and stuff like that. So yeah, there were songs I picked. Consternation, probably the heaviest song on the album. Increase and My Twin. The songs My Twin, July, and Deliberation are a little bit poppy, a little bit, you know, kind of verse, chorus, verse, if you will, and a lot of the fans didn't like them. There's some of my lesser favourites on that album, lesser favourites of Catatonia in general, but still good, and fantastic album, so yeah, check it out. And now we're going to an album that you will all have heard of. All I can say is, haters gonna hate. You know, when I made this top 10 I said, people might have a problem with one or two that I pick, and they're gonna have a problem with Coldplay. There's no doubt about it. They're going to have a problem with it. A Rush of Blood to the Head, a much less pretentious Chris Martin. Still a fan of Coldplay, even through the Viva La Vida era. I really love X and Y, regardless of how bland people thought it was. I don't agree, personally. But this is the best Coldplay album, and Parachutes. But I picked this because it's got more of a fuller band sound than Parachutes did. Released in August 2002, 54 minutes long. A Rush of Blood to the Head. Not very cool to put this in, but that's not what this is about. Pitchfork gave this a 5 out of 10. Well done, Pitchfork, you gotta love them. That's a different matter altogether. But yeah, this album opens up with the best Coldplay song ever made, Politic. There's a lot of emotion, no pretension there. A lot of emotion, a lot of beauty, a lot of incredible piano, and they still had a lot of piano in the songs. The song was inspired by the events of 9/11. Great lyrics. And the singles that they released from this album, you can't really complain about them. I think bands these days, in the last 5 years, they seem to bring out the worst song on the album as single because it's catchy or poppy or whatever. It's got a great hook, I don't know, but this album, you can't say that the singles aren't great. In My Place, Gotta Put a Smile Upon Your Face, The Scientist, Clocks, come on, you can't deny it. Cracking songs. And then also songs like Daylight, A Whisper, Amsterdam, A Rush of Blood to the Head, Warning Sign, Green Eyes. I've said all the album there, and there isn't a weak track there. Coldplay were the first band that I ever loved. I was listening to these when I was 10, when my mum bought Parachutes, and I called it depressive music. A week later I was addicted to it, and that really started my music journey. A bit of sentimentality putting Coldplay this high, maybe it's not that quite good at number 5, but I still love Coldplay. Check out Coldplay B-sides as well, because a lot of their best songs are B-sides, honestly. And just love this album. Just love this album. It's cracking stuff. I don't need to say much more because it's probably the most well-known album here in my top 10, but yeah, I love it. Number 5, A Rush of Blood to the Head by Coldplay. And no, it's not A Rush of Blood to the Head. At number 4, it's A Natural Disaster, ladies and gentlemen. It's A Natural Disaster. Released in late 2003, coming in at 57 minutes, the longest album so far on the list, by the band Anathema, or Anathema, I think it's Anathema. Better be one of my favourite bands. They hail from Liverpool, and they started out like Captonia as a doom metal band, but it didn't last long. They started to fall in love with progressive rock in their early mid-20s and started like making music of that type, but never took out that kind of emotion and sense of atmosphere and sadness and a lot of other feelings that doom metal has. I love doom metal, and just made it into kind of progressive rock, but there's a lot of beauty in the music. And this album, they've got a song which is on decoder. It's kind of like auto-tune, but not really. It's like a robotic voice the whole way through the song. That's called Closer. You want to listen to that, Anathema Closer. Really unique. The song either a lot of piano in the music. Pulled Under at 2,000 meters a second sounds a lot like a Pink Floyd song. If you're a big Floyd fan, check that out. There's no doubt they ripped that off. There's no doubt they ripped it off. But they made it into a great song themselves. But if you just listen to it, I'm not going to tell you which one, but if you're a Floyd fan, check out that song, Pulled Under at 2,000 meters a second. Pardon me. The album ends with Violence, an instrumental piece, which just builds and builds and builds and then explodes. Everything's going off, chugging guitars, piano at the start, and then for the last 4 minutes it's just piano-like pieces, just boo. It's just beautiful, it really is. Very post-rocky, a little bit of post-rock in the sound, I guess, but it is one of my favourite songs of all time. You've got Electricity in there as well. A lot of people on first listen would say they kind of sound like Radiohead as well. You know, piano. A lot of people would call the music depressing, and people always say that's a bad thing, that music's sad or depressing. Well, look at the world we live in, motherfuckers. Nothing wrong. As I said, you know, music for all moods. I like happy music as well, but not as much as depressive music. And this album isn't very happy. A Natural Disaster. There's a bit of female vocals as well from Miss Lee Douglas. She's quite an attractive lady. In there as well. And they mix that up. Both the brothers, Vincent Kavanagh and Danny Kavanagh, both sing on this album as well. And it's nice to have a few different voices in there, but it's just a cracking adventure, a cracking journey. I love this album. Fantastic front cover as well. And that's that, number 4. Let's do number 3 now. Right, one of the most critically acclaimed albums of all time. Released in May 2001. 80 minutes long. But it is a prog album. The first, well, not first, but another prog album, but a prog metal album. A lot of people will obviously know this album, but it is genuinely that good. Fans of this band are very pretentious. They truly are. I'm not one of them, but you've got to admit and accept that this album is a fantastic listen. The best album they've made, in my opinion. And it is Tool, and the album is Lateralus. I think I said that right. As I said, the music is quite pretentious. Lyrics that are all over the place and just full out strange, and they've always had little filler tracks like 1 to 3 minutes long that get in the way. That happened on Enema, in my opinion, and on 10,000 Days. Still great albums, but this album, it all fits together, and those little pieces like Eon Blue, Apocalypse, Mantra, Fayette, Oad, they all fit in. And then you've got Reflection, which is an 11-minute kind of tribal prog rock song, which I could listen to all day. It's that addictive, it keeps building. The lyrics are amazing, although obviously they don't make sense. Not a lot of Tool fans would argue that. But The Grudge opens it up with one of the best screams in music of all time. Maynard does genuinely have a fantastic vocal range. Maynard James Keenan, lead singer. Then you've got The Patient, you've got Schism, you've got Parabol and Parabola, and how they come together. Love how chilled out and quiet Parabol is, and Parabola just explodes. Ticks and Leeches, oh yes. Then the actual song Lateralus, which is a masterpiece of metal. Very hypnotic, it's a good word to use for Tool. Chugging guitars, but a lot of instrumental, chilled out pieces as well. Fantastic drumming from Danny Curry. He's one of the best drummers in the world. But everyone in this band are good at what they do. Adam Jones, Maynard, Justin Chancellor on bass guitar. He's a cracking bassist as well. I've not even spoke about the instrumental track Triad, which is absolutely fantastic. And although Triad is Chinese, I get a kind of African influence there as well. There's a lot of tribal influence in Tool's music, and it's all over this album. There's no doubt about that. But 80 minutes long. If you've never heard Tool, this album does take time to get into. I didn't like it for a long time when I first listened to it about 4 years ago, but I love them now. I just wish they'd released more music. Supposedly they've got a new album out next year, but I get the feeling that Maynard's not a big fan of being in the spotlight, and he doesn't like the celebrity lifestyle, and he's very critical of that and everything. So good for him, but I wouldn't mind a new Perfect Circle album and a new Tool album, so, you know, get to it, hurry the fuck up. Because he's a fantastic singer and Tool are a fantastic band, and yeah, number 3, Lateralus Tool. The 3 I've picked are Triad, Reflection and Lateralus, but Lateralus and Reflection, put those motherfuckers on loop all day because they're that good. Incredible. Anyway, number 2 now. And an album from a man that I've only been listening to for 4 months. And I'm saying it's my second favourite album of the 21st century. I mean, that says it all. This guy's only 28 years old. He could have an incredible future, you know, but never say never in music. You don't know what's coming next and all that. He might quit tomorrow, but I have a feeling personally this guy could go for 40, 50 years like the man people say he's ripping off, but he's not. But he does have a similar voice to a certain guy who I'll speak about in a minute. But he's his own man, he's his own sound, and he's the tallest man on earth. But he's actually not, that's the name he goes under. But he's actually 5'7", and that's quite misleading. If I ever go to one of his concerts, I might have to sue him. But this album is The Wild Hunt, and Mr. Christian Matson, he's only 5'7", but he goes under the name of the tallest man on earth. Very pretentious name. But I like it. Only coming in at 35 minutes, guys. Released April 2010, but 35 minutes. I've been listening to it for 4 months, so why is it number 2? Well, quite simply, he's an incredible songwriter. His vocals are very reminiscent of Bob Dylan. They are, there's no doubt about it. But he's not a copy or anything like that. But he's got a kind of gravelly voice. Sometimes not kind of suitable for folk. Sometimes I make myself believe that I don't like his vocals, but you've got to listen to him. when he speaks, when he sings. He reels you in, he really does.